can you come on up and introduce yourself?
Yes, hello. Is my magic mic working? Okay, cool. I'm Cass Fernandes, and I'm pretty new to the team. I'm a product manager, and Rachel and I are going to be giving the first talk of the day. Rachel will give us a kind of year in review, look back at what Blockly has been up to lately, and then she'll pass it back to me, and I'll give us kind of that forward-looking view of what to expect from Blockly in the near term. So, sweet. Anything else to add there?
Nope.
Great.
Okay. So as I've done in previous years, I've broken this into core team, code base, documentation, partners, and community for both the year in review and the looking forward. So I'll run through each of those for the year in review, pass it off to Cass for looking forward. And core team, I introduced the core team a little bit earlier. There are a couple things that have changed recently. So Cass, as mentioned, is one of our friendly new faces. We have a PM. And we also have Eric, who's a technical program manager, and he joined us in March. And let's see, there are a bunch of people here who you probably recognize from the last summit. We have Neil, who is a software engineer and made Blockly. We have Christopher, who's a SWE. Marybeth is our tech lead. Becca is downstairs. Becca is one of our SWEs. And did I manage to forget anyone who is here?
Yourself, yeah.
Hi, I'm here. I lead the team. I've been working on Blockly for a while. We also have Aaron, who is here at the summit. He is a 20%er on our team now, but you may recognize him from GitHub and the forum as well. We have other 20%ers within Google. So this is like one of the cool things that you can do at Google is you can work part-time on projects other than your own. And so we have these folks who have been working a lot on plugins, on documentation, on things that are generally in the Blockly samples repository. Blake is here, and John and Justin, I believe, are participating online. So let's talk about the code base. And the key word here is TypeScript. We converted the code base to TypeScript. This was a huge push because updating across several generations of language is tricky. And we got a lot of benefits out of it. In particular, we, in the process, really solidified our API boundaries, so we can now confidently say, this is public or this is private. And then that means that when we make changes, we can actually tell you, this is a thing we've changed, rather than we think you might notice that we've changed something over here, maybe, but only if you were doing it wrong. So, and also because of that kind of barrier that we've created between internal and external, we also have been able to do a bunch of tech debt cleanup in the process, which makes me very happy, having written a lot of that tech debt in the past, to see someone else take it and send it out the door. The whole team contributed a ton to this, but in particular, Christopher was really involved in figuring out how to make TypeScript do the things that we wanted to do, how to make the compiler do the things we wanted to do. And Blake also contributed a lot of suggestions on weird things to do with TypeScript, some of which we actually wanted to do, some of which were very weird and we did not want to do. So that was stuff that was kind of in the core repository, but we also did a bunch of work in our Blockly samples repository. So we published a couple different plugins. We have a field-dependent dropdown plugin, and this one is for handling the kind of weird but fairly common case where you've got two fields on your block, and you have a dropdown in one, and you want to change everything about the block in response to something changing in the dropdown. And so there's a bunch of state here. And we've had suggestions for how to do this, but John actually published a plugin that just makes this a lot easier to do, has a canonical way to do it. Becca created procedure blocks that use an external data model instead of just inspecting the workspace every single time you want a procedure. And this is actually part of trying to make it easier to share procedure definitions between workspaces so that you can do things like have have multiple workspaces working together where you define functions in one and you use them in another and have the same procedures. And then Neil extracted 3 of our fields from core and moved them into separate plugins. And those are the angle, color, and multi-line text fields right now. This is part of a broader push to take the things that we have that are in core and pull them out so that you can get them when you need them, rather than just automatically getting every single thing that we've ever written whenever you use Blockly. Marybeth made a starter app to help you kind of bootstrap an application that uses Blockly. And she says that if you have ever tried to create a plugin and been annoyed, you should talk to her. And she has thoughts about that. We also officially stopped supporting Internet Explorer. And this, again, is one of those things where it's like, it seems small there, but there's a long tail of code that's related to that. So I'm very happy to have gotten that done. And then we improved performance a bunch. And Becca has a talk. She's going to be talking more about that later, as is Evan. OK, so that was Codebase. Codebase had a lot going on. Documentation. Justin, one of our 20%ers, updated Codelabs to make it sure that they're up to date, easier to use. And then John also wrote an additional Codelab that's about validating blocks and how to display a warning indicator. We're continuing to use the Codelabs as kind of this way of saying, like, there is a canonical way we think you should do this, and here's our suggestion for how to do it, and if you follow these steps, it'll work. And if you want to do something weird, you can deviate from this and use the rest of the fairly expressive APIs that we have available. Partners. So we have been working a lot with code.org in the last year, and we have some folks from code.org who are actually here. Go ahead and wave. I saw one. There we go. We have two code.org people here. So they've been on a very old version of Blockly because they were one of the really early adopters of Blockly. And so we've been getting them to update to mainline, and that's involved Marybeth working with them a lot to kind of find the things that they need, the features that they need, and make sure that those can be implemented as plugins. And she'll be talking more about how we did that, kind of the structure of how we make those updates happen. And then with a similar goal of getting to mainline or unforking, we started working with App Inventor at the beginning of Q2. App Inventor also here. And also want to just call out that Mark Friedman and Evan Patton from App Inventor have been super helpful on the forum, very active on the forum, and we love this. And if anyone else is active on the forum and super helpful, we will also say your name in front of people and say how great you are. So you should do that. It's totally worth it. OK, and that takes us over to community. So this is our first time doing a hybrid summit, and our first summit in person since the pandemic started. It is the 5th summit overall, and the community has grown a lot in that time. And you can't see it all for who's here in person in the room, but there also are a bunch of people online. And we also have historically seen a lot more activity on the forum as a result of the summit, as people start to actually know each other. You know, they're like, oh yeah, I know that person. That person is friendly. That person, you know, talks like this on their emails. So we're hoping to see that again. We have attendees from all over the world, and for anyone who is awake really early or really late to be here, I appreciate that. Thank you for doing that. And we have lots of presentations. We have lots of demos, so we'll get to see all of that in a bit. Lots of you contributed. I want to call out a few contributions in particular. I cannot list every single person who's contributed in the last year. Yutaka Yamada helped with building and testing core Blockly on Windows, which is something that is kind of a pain point that some people hit, and there are workarounds, but he actually came through and fixed all the stuff. They came through and fixed all the stuff. Johnny Yoshika helped test and debug new releases as we worked our way through the TypeScript migration and was really active in being like, hey, newest release broke here. We'd put a fix out immediately, and that really got a fast turnaround cycle while getting testing with real, actual users. And we also had someone, Taikono Himazin, fix assorted small bugs in our repositories. We have a bunch of them. They're labeled small or good first issue, stuff like that. And they may look small, but it's really nice to have someone come through and be like, hey, I have just picked up all of your bugs, taken them, fixed them, they're done. So from that, we're going to go over to what's next, which is going to be Cass.
Awesome. Thanks, Rachel.
Big green button.
Big green button. Awesome. So Rachel gave a view of kind of the past year, some of those high-level updates, and I'm going to do the same for our next year. And more of the talks at the summit will cover this stuff in detail, but this is just kind of that first high-level look. So as far as the core team, we expect those folks that Rachel introduced, our SWEs, Eric as the TPGM, myself as the PM, to be working on more of the core library, our plugins, and then our partner projects. And then one exciting note here is that Becca's hosting a summer intern who started on Monday, I believe. So he may be watching the live stream. If you are, Caesar, we're very excited to have you. In terms of the code base, we're going to continue to take more parts from core Blockly and pull those into separate packages so that one can use what they need and only what they need. So this might be fields, the horizontal toolbox, and workspace comments. And then we also want to continue to improve the process of creating new blocks and use modern best practices. So more to come there for best practices around publishing packages of blocks and language generators. We'll also focus on improving test coverage. So we have a goal to get to monthly releases and have most of those be minor releases. We currently do quarterly. So Eric is working on improvements to our automated testing to get us to those releases where we want to be. We're also still thinking about performance improvements. We've made some performance strides over the past few years, and Becca will be talking more about performance in her upcoming talk, so tune into that if you want to learn more. All right, documentation. So there's this first big bucket around educational best practices. Basically, Blockly has these amazing educational use cases, right? These very impactful products that are built on Blockly in the education space. But in the past, on the Blockly team, we've really focused just on the technical side, right? We've made sure that from resources and support, you had what you need technically to do the things, to do the good things in education. But we found a need over the past year-ish to provide more support from a curriculum lens as well. So we have Josh Caldwell here from a curriculum team at Google, and we have other curricular attendees for the first time at the summit from different companies. And the goal is to start that conversation today and tomorrow at the summit with those folks from the curriculum community, have opportunities for software developers to be talking to the curriculum community, and eventually get to a place where we can have a stance on best practices, publish those best practices. So focus groups are happening, I think, either today or tomorrow around that. Another important area is code labs. So we're always looking for more code lab contributions. This is a really good way if you had something that you thought was particularly tricky on Blockly and you mastered it. We would really encourage you to consider writing a code lab. If you want to do this and don't know quite where to get started, feel free to reach out to the forum, and we'd love to give you some guidance so you could write a code lab. And then lastly, we will continue to improve the quality of our examples in the next year. All right, partners. As Rachel said, kind of these two big efforts and partners are getting Code.org and App Inventor updated to mainline. So we have, as Rachel said, Code.org and App Inventor are both here. So feel free to start conversations with them in kind of the informal moments and learn more about what they've been doing. For App Inventor, we also will be pulling out some of their cool features as plugins. So some of those generalizable features that others can use. That's a big benefit of these efforts. And then lastly on partners, we moved from being a team of only engineers to we have a few more businessy roles. So myself as a PM, Eric as a TPGM. And this means that we now have the bandwidth to talk to more partners and kind of figure out where those intersection points are between our team and partners and recognize those areas of collaboration. So if you are a partner, you're working on a project that you're excited about, whether you work at a company or it's an individual project, what have you, we would love to hear more about it and kind of what's on the horizon for you. So you could reach out to me directly at clfernandes@google.com. Or if you want to share with the whole group, you can share with the forum and just let us know what you're up to. I would love to hear more. All right, and lastly, as far as the community in the next year, which is all of you tuning into the summit here in person, our big focus is we want to make it easier for folks to get more involved and then stay involved. So part of that is deepening our understanding of the developer user journey, right? So how does one first hear about Blockly, start contributing, get to where they feel they're more of at a mastery stage? Like where are the peaks and valleys along that journey, and how can we better support you? So we have Jamie here. She's kicking off some user research today and tomorrow at the summit. And then we want to ultimately use this information to prioritize pain points and make the experience better. Plugins. We have amazing plugins, but it can be a little bit tricky to find the ones that you want to use or to know that one that you want even exists. So we want to make these plugins easier to find. So the discoverability of plugins is what we're calling that. We mentioned this a little bit already, the developer tools and workflows for building blocks. We want to keep making that better. And then that last piece around the curriculum community, which I talked about as well. We want to make our Blockly community inclusive of folks in the curriculum space in addition to the software developers that are already, the bulk of our community. Great. Well, that's that high-level overview of the big things in the next year. Again, other talks will dive into the details, and we'll be around to talk more about it. Anything you want to add, Rachel?
Nope, I think that's all.
Okay. I'm wielding this pointer very aggressively, but I think that might be last slide, so we can transition to Q&A.
Yeah. So if anyone has questions about any of that, we are happy to take those questions now. And of course, you can also find us later online, all of that.
What's your favorite plugin?
What's my favorite plugin? Procedure blocks are pretty cool.
So this was just a small thing I ran into, so maybe more it's a question for Maribeth than for you, Rachel. But about the plugin generator stuff, I've been playing around with that. And for some reason, when I run it, I'm getting TypeScript 5, but Blockly is written for TypeScript 4, and this causes some issues. So are there plans to make sure that all of the tooling around these changes in Blockly is going to be fixed to the right TypeScript version?
Yeah, that is definitely more of a Maribeth question. Do you want to answer that? All right, go for it.
Yeah, so we're still pretty new at the process of managing plugins, and especially managing plugins for other people. We know our workflow, we don't necessarily know your workflow, so thanks for working with us. If you run into these problems, definitely file issues so that we know about them. That one in particular, we recently updated the DevTools package to be compatible with TypeScript 5. So I believe as of fairly recently, that should work together, but that was a problem until pretty recently. So, if this goes for anyone, if you run into those kinds of problems, definitely file issues because we might not know about them because our workflow is probably a little bit different than yours.
Thank you. Do we have any?
Yeah, we have a few questions from the online. Am I mic'd right now? Do I stand up? Do I take one of these?
I think when you're up here, you can just talk into your mic.
Okay. So I see one question that says, can you tell us a little bit about timelines for fixing developer tools? That's again, yeah, Maribeth.
I'm looking back at Maribeth, who is getting a mic right now. Are we on time?
Timelines for fixing developer tools. So this is on my to-do list for this quarter, is to start writing a process doc for what those improvements will look like. Christopher also is working this quarter on guidelines for publishing blocks and generators specifically, which is tied into block developer tools. But I think next quarter is when we'll see more development and tangible results that we can share with you all.
Great.
Awesome. I see another question here that says, what do you think about the relationship with Scratch?
So we have, we've worked with Scratch pretty extensively in the past, is a mild way of putting it. And I'm looking forward to working with them again in the future. I think also that curriculum focus that we have also is where it gets really interesting, because Scratch has the blocks part, and I focus a lot on the blocks part, but that's really not all that Scratch is, obviously, and a lot of that stuff around curriculum they have been researching, and so we want to actually take their best practices and apply them. Can you wave, Chris? So we have Scratch here, yep. So welcome, and yeah, I'm excited to have that going forward.
I see a question around TypeScript. Is the TypeScript version a drop-in replacement to non-TypeScript 9.3?
The way that so as far as whether a specific version is a drop-in replacement for another version, we are really carefully keeping our release notes going so that you can actually see every single thing we've changed. We are doing the semver, major, minor, and bump. And so if something is a minor version, it should work. And we are trying to get those to be, we're trying to get increasingly confident about that. As I mentioned, there are things where people have been using corners of our APIs in the past, and so there's always this question of, did we change something no one knew was public? So I'm not sure if it's quite a drop-in replacement, but I do know that we've actually written down what specifically we're changing every time we make a change. And those release notes are published on the forum, and those are also published on NPM, I believe, and they're in our GitHub releases. So you can definitely find those.